start off with Thames Water. Richard, if I could ask you, how can fats be prevented from clogging London sewers?
It comes down to behaviour change. So first of all, we're working hard with individual customers, persuading them that just because when you wash up and you use some washing up liquid and it's all nice and warm and soapy and it all looks as though it's gone away, as soon as it goes down the sink and gets cold again, it very quickly reconstitutes itself as fat, and you can very quickly create your own blockage outside your own house or your neighbour's house if you're not very careful. So we do make fat traps available to people, big education campaign with individual consumers, and of course we're the only utility really where our customers actually operate part of the system. I mean, every decision they take to turn on a tap, what they flush down the toilet, what they put down the sink, that's actually our problem to deal with. So there's a big education piece here. But the other part of it is the food service establishments. And the issue there is about grease and oil that gets down the sewer. In some cases, we've had people in the past tipping waste oil down the sewer. That happens less often than it used to. And there are collection schemes being devised that will help that. But it's also just about all the grease from everything that gets cooked. So we did a survey of 1,000 food service establishments, and 90% did not have effective grease management processes in place. And that's not just a wastewater problem, it's also a fire hazard. So we work to educate. So we have a pack here, Protecting Your Business, explaining how food service establishments can fit proper grease traps, and then how to maintain them, service them, and make sure they're effective. We do have powers to enforce that if need be, but we'd much rather work through education. So we do a series of visits. The first visit to explain what the problem is, and then we go back and check, and then we go back again. So gradually we can get tougher with people if they're not following the rules. Part of the problem there is that some food service establishments change hands quite quickly, so you're constantly re-educating people. And that's a process we have to do more and more of. And we work very closely with council environmental health officers, although some local authorities have had budget cuts and there aren't as many EHOs as there used to be. So we have to take on more of the responsibility for that. But it comes down to a constant education campaign.
Okay. So you said about 90% of sort of food outlets or groups that work with food, restaurants and so on are substandard. So do you think it's a widespread practice?
35,000 food service establishments registered across London roughly, and we did a survey of 1,000. So a pretty good representative survey, and 90% did not have what we regarded as efficient measures to trap fats, oils and greases. And it wasn't only at the bottom end of the market, this was at all levels, just sheer lack of awareness. And very often when it was pointed out to people, they were very happy to do what was required.
Okay, yeah. Edward,
So
you're involved in the industry. So.
Yeah, I think grease is the issue that binds everything together. That's the problem. I mean, we work with some of the UK's leading groups and operators, and they are proactive, but I think if a restaurant's over 10 years old, chances are it hasn't got a grease separator, and so grease is going straight to the drain, and that is the problem.
So you mentioned grease, and we've got like fats, oil and grease. What's the difference between oil and grease and fat? Is grease more of an issue than
fat, oil and grease is the product derived from washing pots and pans that gets into the drainage system. So that's what's causing the fatberg.
Okay, right. And are there specific hotspots in London where this is more of an issue? And are there any reasons why there might be specific hotspots where there are a higher incidence of blockages and so on?
I mean, you've got a map in your folder which shows the areas marked red of where we have the most blockages. It's a number of factors. It's
like East London is a bit of a hotspot to me, according to this.
It's the number of food service establishments in a concentrated area, and it's also got something to do with the size of the sewers. So what we do is we record this, and I've got actually a list of borough by borough of blockages for fats, oils and greases. And Hounslow.
Would you be able to supply that to the
Yes,
committee? Because
indeed.
I'm sure some of our colleagues who are not here today might be represented, obviously all of London, either geographically or London-wide, but I think others might be interested if you do have that broken down by borough. That would be great if you could supply that to us afterwards. Thank you, Richard.
So you mentioned that the food service outlet, food service establishments before. Does that include takeaways and things? Okay, right.
Where food is prepared, you're likely to get some grease, and that then needs to be managed properly. Otherwise, it goes down the drains and causes blockages.
Okay. I see from the map it looks like there's some hotspots around Hounslow and also Bexley, which is a...
Hounslow and Bexley are both high up on the blockage list, and it's to do with a number of food service establishments and how close together they are, but it is also to do with the size of the sewers. So you may find that in those areas there's slightly smaller sewers, so they block more often, but then by monitoring that we can then target our education activities more closely on those boroughs.
Yeah. I mean, as far as you're concerned, I mean, with the sewer out pipes and so on, have you got any plans to widen the sewers in some of those areas? Is that part of the
It's very
strategy?
expensive to do. I mean, the sewers are in good condition, so we would only widen them if they needed to take more flow, either foul flow or in the combined areas, surface water. When there are new developments, then yes, we do build additional sewerage capacity. But it doesn't really make sense to be digging up roads and replacing perfectly serviceable sewers just because people are putting grease and wet wipes down them. We'd much rather be used properly. And we also stepped up our cleaning. We do proactive cleaning. We did about 100 miles of sewer last year, going through, looking for, put CCTV cameras down to see whether these, just the odd tree root that gets instantly creates something that can start to build a blockage. So we do that in areas where there's perhaps the sewer dips a bit and it begins to silt up. We'll get in and jet that out and keep them as clean flowing as we can. But as I say, it's the things that people put down them. And it's not just actually fats, oils and greases. We find everything from concrete to traffic cones to bedspreads, all sorts of things end up in the sewer. And it's just a constant job to get them out.
Trying to stick with the fats,
Sorry.
the oils and the grease for now, because I don't think there's much. Hopefully you're not finding too many traffic cones. Just following on from what David was saying, can I just ask you, you're saying that these particular hotspots are created in some cases by smaller sewers, and I think we've explored that might be impractical to just enlarge. Are there particular types of cuisine or different types of food outlet that are more prone to creating larger amounts of fat that could be focused on by Thames Water in terms of that education process? I mean, are fast food outlets, for example, more prone to, more fat in the drain than others?
I think it's difficult to generalise, but certainly the more fat that they use in the cooking, the more is likely to get into the drains. And when I talk about the smaller size of the sewers, it's more about that particular network may just be more likely to block. So we're just the way we do it is to monitor where the blockages are and then target the campaigns locally to make sure we get the maximum impact. So you've got the overarching sort of fatberg type awareness raising. You've got the very focused area on food service establishments. Plus you've got the individual customer education, so you're trying to hit all the constituent parts of the problem.
Okay, what about sort of enforcement and rules? And what rules and laws are there to try to prevent people from putting fats and oils and greases down the drain? So what enforcement measures can you take, and what enforcement measures can local councils take?
We and local authorities both have enforcement powers. We prefer not to use those powers. We'd much rather educate people. But we did have one, actually it was a food manufacturer that blocked sewers consistently despite warnings, and they were taken to court and they were fined. And we will do that if we need to, if they've genuinely caused a significant problem in the sewers, but we'd much rather work with education. It's much more effective.
Was this for someone who was consistent? You said did it over and over and over again?
They did it twice. In each case, it put a small sewage works out of action. This was just outside London, and they went to court and were fined. So we have the powers, and when we're talking to people, we can say, look, the last resort, we will take you to court. But it's much better to work with persuasion.
Yeah. Okay. And you talk about education. You brought in something, the fat trap there. Something. Is that what else do you do to try to seek to educate people, and how does your education program work for
works at various levels.
Awareness?
It works via the media. I mean, the fatberg has been marvellous because it's given us a huge amount of free publicity for the message, and Evening Standard have been really helpful in pushing stories. But then it's a question of and certainly the results from that have been very good. So 2/3 of Londoners are aware of the problem, which was a big increase. We then have to build on that by getting the specific behaviour change. So things like a fat trap, there's a little plastic scraper in here so you can scrape the fat out of a roasting tin rather than you've got to make it easy for people. That's the first thing. There's also schools education. We have stuff on our websites. When we talk to customers, we would try and, when we go around and do water efficiency visits, for instance, we'll also talk about what to put down the sewers. So we're using every opportunity to try and reinforce the messages.
With all of these kind of education programs, and they're fantastic, but you know, I do find sometimes that you get 80% of the problems are caused by 20% of the people. I mean, so there's like a hardcore of people that you can't reach or just won't change their behaviour, are sort of immune to education messaging, just simply don't care, even if you talk about fatbergs. What can you do about those people? What can you do about...
We've got to identify them. So if we've got a blockage in a housing estate, which is the house that's flushing the nappies that they shouldn't be flushing? Which is the one who's regularly putting oil and grease down the sink? If you've got a row of food service establishments, 8, 10 in a row sometimes in a street, which one is it that's actually got the worst behaviour? So if you can pinpoint it, then obviously you can use much firmer persuasion. But more generally, it's just about educating and making it easy for people. If you can explain to people how they can fit a grease trap and how it will work